All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of The Deep End. This is big number 56, and for the first time in at least a handful of episodes, it's just me and mi hermano over there, Mr. Gutman. How you doing, man? Just you and
I'm
me
good, dude.
today.
I actually thought you were gonna say for the first time in a long time, I beat you to the to the
That
waiting
is
room.
true. That's true. Usually when we hop on to do this, Ari's a couple minutes behind, but man, he was on it today. I was surprised.
I was on it. Well, I'll tell you what, man. I'll tell you why. Um, I ordered my burger, which I usually order after the deep end. I ordered it before, and I was already here, set up. I was eating the burger. I was waiting. I was enjoying my 30 minutes before the deep end sesh. So I
Yeah.
was ready for this one, man. But look, a lot of great things are underway, and I want to share. You know, I'm back in marathon mode, Ryan,
I
and
was going to bring this up.
I gotta say, I'm feeling some type of way again, and I'm not just trying to attempt the half. Like it's not a half here. I'm going full marathon. I just started training for it since last Thursday, which I know a lot of people out there are going to be like, "It's not a lot of time," you know. But here's what I have to say to those people: is it's all in the mind. It's all in the mind. That's how I live my life. And Thursday I started running. I ran 6.5 miles. Friday morning I ran 7.5, and then today I ran 9.6.
Yeah, I
And
think you did
tomorrow I think I'm just
15K
gonna
today, right?
bust out. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm gonna bust out a half marathon. I think tomorrow. I got to sleep on it,
Wow.
but I think it's either gonna be the half or maybe a mile less. So either way, we're trucking towards it. But the reason why I'm bringing this up, Ryan, is because it just like I wake up at 4 a.m. and I'm just right out the door running, and it just sets up the day. And it just there's no better feeling than getting back out there.
Mm.
And it's like mile one, isn't going to be great, but as you
Yeah.
know, it's like by mile three, by mile five, you're just having the time of your life in the zone.
Hmm.
And I'm excited, man, for everything this year has in store. Everything this year has in store. So I've just been fueled up, man, on that, and now we're here in February. So
Man, yeah, already a month into 2026. It really went by fast, and what a month. What a way to kick off the year, man.
well, this is where I'm here to say now, like I hope no one out there is feeling behind, and if you are, you better get to it because the year is flying by, and that's why I'm running the marathon. I want to do there's a whole list of things that I want to do this year. I think we talked about it on our goals episode, but it's time to get stuff moving. If you've wasted the last 31 days, get to it.
Yeah.
How have you been though?
Every month is about 10% of the year, so we're already it's not quite 10% because there's 12 months, but it's about there, and so we're already about 10% of the way through the year, and I feel like you blink and it just goes. So, get to it. Yeah, over here in my neck of the woods, man, nothing too crazy in terms of running. Right after I told you, we're at the top of the hour. I got a hard stop because I've got to go for the first time in probably a month. I'm gonna meet up with my run club. So right as soon as we finish recording, I'm gonna head out the door, run about a mile and a half to meet up with them, then do a 10K, so 6.28 miles, then maybe run another mile and a half back home. So I've got a long run ahead of me today, and I'm hydrating up with this body armor for it. Which, by the way, I've been loving these things. Highly recommend. Shout out Coca-Cola there. But things are
Body
going great
armor?
over here, man. Body armor, yeah. But things
I
are
haven't tried Armor yet. I've been drinking. My whole fridge here is full of Gatorade.
there. You
And
go.
I have
Similar thing.
granola bars, Gatorade, pasta.
Yeah.
I got the whole thing, man. We're on the. And you know what? I'm outing myself. Only once a week I allow myself to order something. I call it like it's a date night with me and
Mm.
me. And I order it's the burger, man. I just get a nice burger, and I know I'm gonna regret it tomorrow morning on the run, but it's so worth it, dude. You celebrate the
Though,
week.
I will say there are plenty of worse things you could treat yourself with. If this is your quote unquote cheat meal, there are plenty of worse things you can do. And I really don't think, I mean, it obviously depends how it's cooked and the ingredients and whatever, but I really don't think a burger is really all too bad in terms of the macros. You obviously get a lot of protein. This is where it depends on the meat and stuff. If you're getting it out, yeah, it's probably going to have a lot of fats and salt and sodium. But I mean, the sodium piece will come in handy for the running, get those electrolytes in. But yeah, I think some burgers aren't too bad, especially if you make them at home. So all that's to say, I think there are plenty of worse things that you could do. And in terms of your running this marathon, yeah, it might seem like there's not enough time or there's not a lot of time because I think it's at the end of this month, right?
February. Yeah.
So yeah, it seems like it's not a lot of time to prep, but it's also not like you're starting from scratch with running. It's not like you're a brand new runner. So I think that I don't think it's as crazy as it seems at first. The one question I did want to ask you though, in terms of your training, is how have your joints been feeling? How have like your knees and your ankles and your hip flexors? How's all that felt in getting into this high volume? Have you had any aches or pains? Are you good? Is it mind over matter there too? Where are you at?
Look, age. I will say this, and it's nothing new, but I definitely remember my early 20s and mid 20s, like popping out to do something and never felt anything. And now here in the 30s, you are recovering a little bit slower, and it's not that fast of a recovery. But I also just believe that it is all centered in the mind. And you know me better than anyone, man. It's like when I say I'm going to do something, it's like I make the decision. Actually, let me take that back. When I say I'm going to do something, okay, it's if I decided or not. If I decided on it, then I'm full steam ahead, like I'm all in. And so I don't even think about any of these things while running, the pain, the this, the that. It's just like, okay, this morning I woke up. Last night I went to sleep. I said, tomorrow morning you're going to wake up and you're going to run 15K. That's what you're doing. And so I woke up, I put my shoes on, and I didn't think twice. It was a 15K, and that's what it was. And so before I go to sleep tonight, I'm going to make the decision on whether or not it's going to be the half marathon tomorrow, and then I'm just going to execute. There's no off switch there. There's no like, man, you know me. I'm going to die on the hill. And if I don't come home tomorrow, it's because I've died on the hill.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, because this is something that I've adopted for myself too, or noticed about myself too. If I want to do something tomorrow, the next day, I have to, in my mind, the night before, I have to commit to it then. I can't just wake up, like, let's say it's running, maybe I say, it'd be nice to get up and run in the morning. I can't wake up in that morning and do it based on how I feel. Like I have to tell myself, this is what you're going to do tomorrow. This is kind of the plan. This is the plan. You're going to do it. I have to commit to it the night before, or else I'm not going to do it. If I don't commit to it the night before, I'm going to get up, I'm going to have my coffee, I'm going to watch some YouTube videos, then I'm going to just start getting to work or doing something, and then I'll put the thing off till later in the day. And so I really have to commit to it the night before and game plan ahead. That's the only way, I think for a lot of us actually, that's probably the only way to reach success. If you have goals, if you're trying to accomplish something, you have to commit to it in advance, because that's the only way, or else you'll just let it fall by the wayside because you're not committed to it.
Well, the key I think that you just mentioned is you said the night before I have to say I am going to do X, Y, Z. Like I am going to run tomorrow morning. And what you said, you made a definitive statement there, right? I am then X, Y, Z. And so I think where a lot of people fail, again, I'm saying you fail, is when you don't speak so definitively. Oh, there's my light. You don't speak so definitively. And therein lies the problem if we want to bring it back to finance, and investing. A lot of people will just be like,
let's do that, because that's this is a finance podcast, right? I think it is.
I was having fun talking about
not
the
so
running,
far.
man.
No, I was too. I mean, I
Um,
was too. But 10 minutes in, let's get into it. Let's bring it back home.
we'll get to some finance. Well, yeah. Look, this is the big problem people have: is I want to get rich doesn't mean anything. It means nothing. But I want to make, I want my salary this year to be 80,000, 100,000, 150, whatever the thing, because then your brain will start to process everything differently. And when it's not going to, when you are saying, I am going to XYZ, anything that's not going to get you to that goal, the XYZ, you can eliminate. And you're going to operate differently versus the person who's just so wishy-washy. Like you're saying, let me just bring it back to running real quick. Like it's not like I woke up this morning and I was like, my body, I had an Instagram post that I put out earlier today. And I kind of said like what my body was saying, what my mind was saying. And then
Hmm.
at the start, so my body said, maybe you can rest a little bit longer because it's 4 a.m. And then my mind said, get the F out of bed,
Yeah.
And then I said, underneath that, that was starting and then finishing. I said, my body said, you did it. And my mind said, you could do better tomorrow. And so that's just how I've been operating. And financially speaking, that's also how I operate. So notice if you go back to our goals episode, like I commit to the goal of delivering through on getting to what was it, $575,000. Like I am gonna. That's it. Like I don't know how I'm gonna make that happen, but I'm gonna make it happen. Die
Hmm.
on the hill.
Yeah. Absolutely, man. I know going back to running, the thing for me and the cuz it's so hard to beat a morning run. There's just something about running in the morning that is really second to none. It's like it really is the best time. But it's a trade-off because it is the hardest time I think to get into running to actually get going and because you're not warmed up. Maybe if you're just out of bed, you're still maybe half asleep. The juices aren't quite flowing yet, the blood's not moving, and it takes a while to really settle into it. But then once you do, and once you get it done, it's like it's the best way to start your day. It's something hard that you can do. You feel rejuvenated, you feel alive afterwards, and you're ready to tackle whatever else is going on that day. But that's the thing about some of these difficult goals too, is even if you do get up to do the thing, you still probably don't want to do it. But the thing is, if and this expands to beyond just running. Once you kind of get settled in and get going, you're good. And then afterwards, you will never regret having just gotten up to go run. You will only regret sleeping in and not following through on your commitment. So you always have to balance that. It's like you either do the hard thing now and feel good about it or feel proud of yourself for it, or just disappoint yourself. And that's a slippery slope. I think we've talked about this too. If you continue to disappoint yourself enough, that will trickle into other areas of your life, and it's not good. It's not going to be good.
Well, you literally, you'll give yourself the out, and this is what I work with. Literally everyone I work with, like anybody that I'm sitting with to do, whether it's professional work, personal work, on this path, is really talking about people's traumas, and their self victimization, and it actually starts here, man. Our self talk is big, and so
Hmm.
when you are telling yourself, well, I could do it tomorrow. No, you cannot. If you're, and I, again, you have to be this hard. I talk about this a lot. I don't set an alarm clock. I haven't set an alarm clock for 9 years. I
Wow.
will tell myself the night before, like, hey, I want to wake up at this time. And, thank God I'm all in sync and I wake up either on the dot or around the dot. And I move, right? But the reason why I'm starting there is because when you go this hard in committing, like I don't set the alarm clock, Ryan, because I don't know if I'm going to wake up tomorrow. And honestly, if we all get really honest with ourselves, No one knows if they're going to wake up tomorrow. Zero people know definitively if we're going to wake up tomorrow. And so when you set the alarm clock, you're assuming you're going to wake up tomorrow. And man, this is like a meditation for me. Because if I so much as think that I have tomorrow and I can just push everything off till tomorrow, I've lost today. I've lost the ridiculous amount of momentum that I'm going to have today. And so that's how I look at it, is I'm like, hey, I really don't know if I have tomorrow, but I do know one thing: I have today. And therefore I get 110% today. And that's what gets me out. That's what drives me forward. And it just, man, it feels like a force. It's like a power. And then because I'm running at 4 a.m., no one's out there. Not a single soul is out there, man. And I love it. Because I already know people are cozied up in bed, and I'm out there running, and I look at finances that way. I keep bringing this back here to finances as well. Me and you both know that there are hundreds, thousands, hundreds of thousands of people that even if they're watching this right now, they might not be as committed as us. They might not invest every single week.
All hundreds of thousands of you guys watching.
Yeah, they're out there.
They're out there. Yeah,
you know what I'm saying, man?
Yeah, it's all relative, right? Like it's all on a scale, and I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I would imagine getting to this point, getting to this mindset, has been a gradual thing for you. It wasn't something that happened all at once, right? And so there's been an evolution, there's been a progression, and I think that's how these things go, is you got to start somewhere, and then you make it a point to be a little bit better the next day, maybe a little bit more focused, more diligent the next day, and you continue to build on that as time goes on, and eventually you get to the point where it's just normal, and you look back and you're so much farther ahead than where you started. But I think when you get to the root of it, it really is all about, you versus you, in terms of doing the hard thing, making the decision to do the hard thing. You're always battling against yourself. You always have two versions of yourself on each shoulder, one that knows the right thing to do, which is always the hard thing. And the person on the other shoulder, the other version of you, is the one that's going to give you that slack. And so you're always kind of battling against yourself. And the general theme, and this is not going to be news to takeaway, I should say. This isn't going to be news to anyone. This is going to be obvious, but I think the takeaway from all of that is the more that you choose this one, the guy that's on this shoulder, that's telling you to do the right but hard thing, the more you listen to him, the better off you're going to be.
Not only that, the easier it becomes over time to listen to that one.
Yeah, you think so? It gets easier?
I think so. I mean, it's been my experience, and you hit the nail on the head. Like, yeah, this wasn't an overnight affair where all of a sudden I was like 110% in, right? Man, I've been on my journey for 9 years. So I get the people who are like, whoa, Ari's too intense. I'm 9 years down a journey, And the journey has gotten easier and easier because the decisions have become so black and white. It's not like, maybe I should wake up at 4 a.m. It's like, you're going to wake up at 4 a.m. That's the deal. Like, maybe I should invest a couple grand this week. No, you're going to invest a couple of grand. Like, that's just going to happen. And so I think, once you start to feed the beast, if you will, the green machine, right? Like, it gets easier. It brings me back. So I ate this past Friday, at a neighbor's home, and I work with both of their kids in different capacities. So one is struggling and with anger management issues, and the other kid is just struggling really with, just call it for what it is, like laziness, And so he was talking to me after dinner. I was sitting with him, and I was asking him, how do you like your new school? He's saying he really loves it, amazing, good. And he was like, I told him a couple things, right? Because he wants to work out with me. I said, I'm training for a marathon right now, so it's going to work. I'm going to do that after. But I said, here's what you're going to do in the meantime. And I gave him, little exercises to do in the morning. through compounding, right? So I said you got to. He's 7, right? So I said you're going to do 5 push-ups, and then each day until I run the marathon, you're going to add 1 push-up, and then 10 jumping jacks, but each day you're going to add 1 jumping jack, and then 10 squats, and each day you add 1 more squat. So, and then I concluded with, and most importantly, make your bed. And he
Yeah.
gave me a funny look. He's like, "Why?" And I was like, "Because making your bed is training the strongest muscle of all, your mind." And then I told him what happens when you make your bed. You achieve success in the morning, in the early morning hours. And you don't have to make, who are you making the bed for? Right? It's your bed. No one else is getting in that bed. And then you come back to that bed and it's you, and you get to get into a made bed. This is your mind. But I said, let's take it one step further, because he was having trouble getting to school early and on time. So I said, how many days this week have you made it to school on time? He said, 1. And I said, is it hard for you? And he goes, yeah, it's really hard for me to get to school on time. So I said to him, look, here's the big secret. It's only hard for you because you've only done it once this week. But if you do it 5 times this week, come Monday of next week, it's going to be easier for you. And then come 30 days from now, you're not even going to be thinking about it. And this is most people with finances.
Yeah.
Investing a big chunk of change, $50K, all of your savings, whatever it is, even just $1 or $5, it's going to be hard for you at first. But then after, a couple investments, after a couple moments of, compounding, right? Frequencies of compounding, it gets easier. And you see results. And then the key is you never want to stop. You'll never want to stop.
Yeah. Absolutely. You just want to keep doing more and more and more of it. And the thing about that is if you set up your life, or if one of your goals is to continue doing more and more and more with your investments, that's going to force you to behave a certain way in life and in your career, and it will force you to set out to do things that will allow you to have more money to invest. So it trickles into other areas of your life. You can't reach those goals if you're basically surrounded by chaos, if there's all this chaos and willy-nilliness going on in your life. And I think that you kind of touched on that. I think that's the important thing with making your bed. It's essentially like saying no to chaos. It doesn't even matter what form that comes in, but a messy bed is certainly one of them. And that's going to have a direct impact on your environment. If you're surrounded by mess and, I don't want to call it filth, but if you're surrounded by things that are disorderly, maybe that speaks to how you live your life. And so if you say no to those things, no matter how big or how small the action you can take to fight against that, all of those little things, whether it's making your bed or doing your dishes, or in my case, sweeping up the cat litter every day, all of those things are going to have a positive impact and will help you maintain order in life. And that order is going to help give you the clarity and the headspace to really focus. It sounds kind of woo-woo. It sounds kind of silly, but it's true. It's going to help give you back the headspace to focus on reaching your goals, whatever those things are. And it does sound weird. Like, how does me not making my bed have an impact on that? What if I didn't vacuum today? How is that going to keep me from getting to my goals? Well, maybe it directly won't, but it is going to. You're going to look around and realize that this place is a mess, and I think it does make it harder to focus on doing the things that you need to get done.
Oh, for sure. I had a buddy who lived in Manhattan, and the last I went to go visit him, I went up to his office. He's a lawyer, personal injury lawyer. So, if anybody needs one, but I went to go, see him in his office, and when I sat down, he was catching me up on his life, and I couldn't take my eyes off of just one thing in his office, and it really got to me. So that statue of it's like the balance scales, the scales of balance, and there's a woman like holding it up. You know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Her arm was broken. Like the statue's arm was broken. And like the whole time he's talking to me about this and about that, and he's like having trouble getting clients and newer clients because of, he just had a baby and this and I said to him, I'm not going to use his real name. I'm just going to call him Robert. I said, Rob, look, man, you could say all you want about all this other stuff, but like, you got a statue behind you that has a broken arm. And so do you think when people come into your office and they're looking for a lawyer who's actually going to do the job and do it well, that they'd want you? Someone who can really pay maybe big bucks, they're going to pay attention to detail, and they see your stupid statue with a broken arm. So I said, do me a favor, fix the arm. Because to your point, Ryan, if you want to live in chaos, that's how your mind looks. It's chaos. But if you want to clean up, you clean your room, you make your bed, you scoop peanuts, you scoop that up. Like it's really your environment, and that environment feeds into your mind, and it's all one.
Yeah, I think you did a much better job of explaining it than I did, but that was spot on. And by the way, guys, it's so funny. We always do this, man. By the way, we came into this episode expecting this to be like a Q&A. We were going to do like a whole Q&A thing. But obviously it kind of took a different direction. So I don't know. I mean,
Well,
should we get into
let's whip one of those cues up, man.
Yeah, let's get into some of these. We've got a few good questions. So this first one actually very timely, certainly relevant to what's been going on this past week, certainly this past month. This first question asks, when will software stocks start recovering? You want to talk about chaos? There's been a lot of chaos in the tech space, in the software space. A lot of it has to do with artificial intelligence, with AI. Ari, first and foremost, yeah, I mean, I guess what are your thoughts? Do you have any thoughts on these stocks going down? Any idea what it's going to take for them to recover? Give us your spiel. What do you think?
Yeah, so tech certainly has been taking quite a beating. But I actually just had this conversation at the dog park with somebody. So I'm happy this is one of the cues. The first thing first, you got to understand your investment timeline. Because if you're trying to invest in software and technology and get out by a couple months to the year's end, well, you might not see a great return, if a solid return whatsoever, depending on your investment. But if you're investing here for the next 7 to 10 years plus, you're going to see likely to see an outstanding return on any tech or software investments. What's going on though right now, I think we just had a new Fed chair named. And so the big question is going to be, what's going to happen with interest rates, right? And we know that the newly elected or newly positioned Fed chair is pro rate cuts. And so that's going to be big. And so if rates are cut, what we're going to end up seeing is big business tech companies with more firepower, software companies with more firepower to spend. And this is what I believe is going to help drive us in a very bullish direction. Interest rates will come down, and tech and growth stocks are going to flare up. Now, there's other things that are happening on a global scale, current events wise, that are also very important. And the market reacts to two things: certainty and uncertainty. And when things are more certain, the market loves that, and we see green. When things get uncertain and there's an inability to really understand in the coming days, months, years, the market doesn't like that, and we see red. And so a couple of things on the global scale that have actually become quite certain. Love them or hate them, Trump really did make some crazy moves in regards to Venezuela. And that is a power play and a half because what that really eliminates a solid threat of China, Russia, Iran. And those are players that do play against us in the China, especially in the tech sector. Why that's important is because if we now are controlling Venezuelan oil, what we're seeing is more predictability and certainty. And people like that, like I said. The other thing that's happening on the other side of the world here with Iran is a potential overthrowing of the regime. And if the regime is overthrown, hopefully, what we're going to see from that is literally going to be a new world order in the Middle East. That is insane what's happening right now. And if the Shah is to come back, well, he's going to be deeply aligned in democratic values, and that's with the U.S. And so, again, that breeds certainty. The market feeds itself on certainty. And so I just think, right now, while things tech-wise are volatile, strongly correlated with the Fed chair, rates, all of this is going to play a role. I don't think it should be too long, but now should be your opportunity. It's an opportunity zone for tech investors, software investors to get in on high-quality companies and stay invested. But don't get in gambling. That's what I will say. Don't get in there gambling thinking you're going to make a quick buck, and get out, because there's still pieces to the puzzle, the certainty puzzle, that are being put together.
So yeah, man, to piggyback off of that, first of all, that was very well said. But to your point, a lot of it does have to come back to uncertainty, specifically uncertainty about how AI is going to impact a lot of these software stocks. And I think, to that point, I think you need to look at each individual company and look at a couple of things. Number one, are they using AI themselves? If so, how? How does that help their business if they are? And number two, like, even despite that, if they are using AI, we can look at a few examples. I think Salesforce is a great example. I think Intuit's a good example. I think Adobe is another name that's been thrown around quite a bit. ServiceNow, which I know is not a dividend payer, that's neither here nor there, but that's another name that I've seen thrown around quite a bit in the mix here. I think you need to look at those and think, well, could AI come in and disrupt them? Or meaning, basically, could someone, with the help of AI, because that's one of the concerns, is that AI is now making these software platforms, these products, easier and cheaper to build. Could someone come in and create a new Adobe, easier, like vibe code a new Adobe, or a new Salesforce, a new CRM, or something else? And so I think those are the two big questions that you need to answer. But I will look at, I look at a few of these companies in particular. I talked about them in recent videos. Intuit and Salesforce for sure, even Adobe. I look at all of those companies and I think these are very sticky businesses. If a business is, if we think of Salesforce, it's basically like the neural network of a company's operations. And they are, their whole business is becoming oriented around AI. That's their whole Agent Force platform. And one of the big initiatives they're doing is creating all of these AI agents, which are basically digital employees that their clients or customers or subscribers can then hire out and implement into their own businesses. And so I look at something like that, and I think if that works, and if that is one of those things that gets better over time, then their subscribers, their customers, Salesforce's customers, they're only going to rely on a company like Salesforce even more. They're going to become even more dependent on it. And so while I think AI concerns are impacting the share prices now, and there is a lot of uncertainty, and I could certainly be wrong, I actually think it's an opportunity because of the reasons that I mentioned with Salesforce. That type of thing, I think, applies to some of these other businesses, that same type of thing. You can find some symmetry there with what Adobe's doing or what Intuit is doing. They're all implementing AI in their own ways. And so I look at all of this stuff right now and I think, there seems to be some opportunity. And I'm actually, I told Ari we were talking about this earlier this week. I told him you're going to be happy because I'm starting to look at some of these tech stocks now, like the Salesforces and the Intuits, and I'm starting to get pretty interested in them because of this. Now, as far as when they'll recover, who knows? I guess when there's more certainty. But that's kind of the thing about technology in general. It's such a fast moving industry that, you know, I would say that certainty is a bit harder to come by than in other industries. And so, because of that, I think you'll always have volatility to some degree in this space. Lately it's been to the upside, but now as we're experiencing in over this past month, it can also occur to the downside. But like Ari said, if you zoom out over a long period of time and understand these businesses that you're thinking about buying or already own, if you really understand them and where they've been, where they're going, and how they're going to get there, that should tell you everything that you need to know. So that's my take on it. Do you have anything else to add to that, Ari, before we jump on to the next one? I know I rambled quite a bit, so I apologize.
Yeah, no, I actually I went super macro, but when you were talking, I was like, man, you didn't zoom back in, and so
It's all right, man. We got the yin
I
and the yang going on over here.
I just wanted to chime in with since the pandemic, man, like everyone threw money into tech and software, and so we saw these stocks soar. I don't think that there's ever been a moment yet that tech and software stocks have really come down to a price point where people have been like, yeah, they're about fair price now. I think since the pandemic, because so much money was thrown into tech and invested into tech and software, that people have ran with the notion that it's overvalued. It's bound to come down soon. And so this is always a lurking notion, I think, when it comes to tech and software these days because of the pandemic. And then factor in, again, what's going to happen with interest rates, right? Because when rates are higher, this is when there's a sting to tech stocks. But again, what we saw, even over the course of rates being higher than we would have liked, is tech still soared. So I do think there's this lingering feeling of like, when is this bubble going to burst? When is this going to come down, right? And so I definitely think that is there, but I don't think it should be anybody's big concern because, look into the future. I mean, we're not going backwards, like we're not going back to, I don't know, a brick type of cell phone. We're only getting smarter with technology and software. And so I think at this point, and it's also earnings season. That's another thing I want to say.
Yeah.
Earnings season always means emotional investing. I don't like investing during earnings season unless the markets are red because everyone's so freaking emotional. And so I think when it comes to tech stocks, in conjunction with all of us thinking, well, this looming thought of when's tech going to come down, when software going to come back down, couple that with earnings season, now people are freaking out. Are they going to beat earnings? And then the next question, if they beat earnings, well, what are the guidance? What's the guidance, right?
Guidance,
it's like,
yeah.
oh man, come on. Like, what's the 5-year, 10-year look like? If you can piece that puzzle together, you have it a good investment.
Yeah, and that's the tricky thing to your point, man. The guidance makes things tricky. A lot of these movements are based on people's expectations. And when companies don't live up to those expectations, which at the end of the day really are arbitrary and on a quarter-to-quarter basis really don't mean anything, especially if the miss is so slight. Like I think Microsoft, I don't remember the exact numbers, but I think they maybe missed on either the top or bottom line, whichever it was. It was a super slight miss, and we saw what happened to the share price there. It reacted so strongly. And tech is not the only space that we've seen this, like Badger Meter, which is a company that I've been really interested in lately as well. I think the stock dropped like 14 or 15% upon announcing their quarterly earnings. And the thing is, like, the sales were up about 9% year over year. I think the free cash flow was up like 20% year over year as well. The company has no debt. They've got a net cash position, if I'm remembering correctly. And so it's like all this good stuff is going on, but the share price dropped, 15%. And sometimes I don't know, I sometimes I think you can't help but laugh because it doesn't really make sense sometimes. The market is such a mystery. It's such an interesting place to spend time and pay attention to, because and that's just human nature, I suppose. Like, things don't always make sense, things don't always seem rational, but at the end of the day, that's where the opportunity lies. And I think that's probably, the key takeaway from all this.
Definitely. 100%.
So yeah, really good question. Let's move on to this next one, though. This one's a bit different. Would you mostly put dividend stocks in a Roth IRA or a regular taxable brokerage account? Do you have any thoughts on that? The ideal place to own dividend
Ryan,
stocks.
is this your
What do you
question? Is this your question, man?
think? I can take it. I can jump in
Yeah.
first if you want. I mean, it is up my alley.
Look, I
So
think it
it's a great.
depends.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
I was just gonna say it depends. Like, do you want to? Are you gonna use those dividends or like what? But Ryan, I'll let you answer and then I'll chime in because I know you're gonna say what I'm about to say. You'll probably explain it in a better way, but then I'm gonna chime in with something to think about.
Okay. So yeah, I know we're on the same page about this. Like Ari was starting to say, it really just depends. It depends on, I think it mostly depends on, not mostly, but certainly one of the things it depends on is your time horizon. When do you realistically, extra emphasis on realistically, when do you realistically see yourself starting to pull your dividends? When do you realistically see yourself reaching financial freedom and having work be optional? Or basically utilizing your investments. Now, this is where it's a trade-off between the taxable account and the Roth IRA. With the taxable account, you obviously have the flexibility to use those funds, the profits, the dividends, the cold hard cash that's in there. You can use it whenever, wherever, without penalty, no questions asked. That's the benefit of it. But obviously, on the other side of that, you have to pay taxes, and that's the downside. The Roth IRA is pretty much the opposite of that. The benefit is that you don't have to pay taxes on the profits or dividends, but you cannot access the profits or dividends in the Roth IRA, excuse me, without penalty until you're almost 60 years old. Now, every time this gets brought up, people always say, yes, but you can withdraw the contributions. Yes, so let's include that. You can, at any time, withdraw your contributions from your Roth IRA. Who wants to do that, though? I mean, don't disrupt compounding unless you absolutely have to. So I think it's just cleaner to put it in the context of when you're actually going to start using the profits and dividends. So there's the trade-off between the two. And yeah, you have to ask yourself, when am I realistically going to start using my dividends? If it's, if you're thinking, maybe when I'm 50 years old or 45 to 50, like considerably before the withdrawal age for the Roth IRA, then I think it makes sense to, I guess, prioritize the taxable account or not neglect it. But, if you're like 55, a few years early, then I don't know. I don't think that's early enough to really go super, super gung-ho into the taxable. Obviously, you can do both at the same time. Most people do both at the same time, as you should. And so, yeah, it just depends. I'll kick it over to you, Ari.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. That's why I said, you know what, you just go for it. The one thing I'll add, coming at this angle from the perspective of the non-dividend investor at this point, is if you are going to take your dividend stocks and put them into a tax advantaged account anyways, and you're young, aka you're not going to touch the dividends. You don't have any real plan to even touch the dividends, then I would encourage you to look into growth. Because what could happen in the 10 to 20 years you're not touching the dividends, because they literally are in a tax advantaged account, so you can't touch them anyways.
Yeah.
You can get exponential growth and then transition that tax advantaged account into more of a dividend orientation at a later stage. And that's just something that if I were to, I don't know, whisper into my younger self's ears, right, and just say, hey, kid, you might want to think about doing this. That's something to think about. But again, if you're someone who wants to use the dividends then they shouldn't even be in the taxable tax savings or tax advantage accounts anyways. And then you have a very different goal in mind. So your goal is
Sure.
really the indicator of what you're going to do.
100%. 100%. And the way I think about it too, because I think we've talked about this before. When I first got into investing, I was, and I still am, like very certain that I'll pull my dividends before, somewhere in my like mid 40s if everything works out as it should is kind of what I'm thinking. Um, and so for that reason, I very much neglected my Roth IRA or any tax advantage account until like a couple years after I started investing. And in hindsight, that was a total mistake because at some point, barring any crazy life events, someday I will be 59 and a half years old. Someday I will be 60 years old, and hopefully I'll live for a long, long time after that. And in those golden years, I will want as much tax free income, as much tax optimization, as much tax free gains as I can get my hands on. And so you kind of have to put yourself also in, even if you do plan on retiring early, you also have to put yourself in the shoes of yourself at 60 years old, at 65, at 70, and beyond. And assuming that you will get to that point in life, like I said, barring any crazy life events, it doesn't make sense to not take advantage of these types of accounts. Why if you're going to be at that point in your life at some point, why not start planning ahead for that now? It's only going to have a positive impact and help you down the road. Otherwise you're setting yourself up to pay more and more taxes later in life, which later in life, I would imagine, I'm sure some of you guys in the comments can speak to this, but the older that you get, the more complicated things tend to become, not just with family and normal overhead expenses, but you'll have more health bills, more health things that you have to deal with. That's going to cost money. There's just more things that you're going to have to concern yourself with, and so you might as well keep as much money as you can and not pay it in taxes if you can help it. But planning for that starts today. Ideally as young as possible.
I agree. 100% agree. And I don't think enough young investors do a lot of the planning because they're so gun ho about, let me just get in the market. But, it's just maybe a cliche or, but really classic, example of, hey, if a pilot gets in a plane
Yeah.
and doesn't know where he's going, like he's not going anywhere. But the other, the other analogy, if you will, that I like is this is all like, if you have two ships that are set to sail and they start sailing and you change the trajectory by like the slightest inch on one of these ships, one is eventually going to veer right off its track, right off its course. And it's going to end up in an entirely different place. And so what I'm really just sharing here is that like planning is incredibly important. And it's incredibly important to do that when you're young because the planning stage, the goal stage, all of that feeds into your strategy, your how, like even down to how aggressive you're going to be. If you have a plan to retire early in the next 10 years, then you better be investing pretty damn aggressively and stop going out, spending all your money everywhere. But if you have a plan to, retire in 40 years, you have a lot of time. Those are two very different investment strategies and courses of actions that are going to need to be taken.
Absolutely, man. Okay, let's jump over to this third question. It's actually kind of similar, I would say. So, with 10 to 15 years until retirement, would you personally lean more toward individual stocks or a mostly ETF based like Roth IRA with a handful of individual stocks mixed in? So, with that amount of time left until retirement, a decent amount of time, but maybe not a super long time, would it be better to go individual stocks or would it be better to go build a portfolio that's mostly ETFs, but maybe you've got a few individual positions in there? What do you think about those two options?
Based on where I'm at in my life right now, I love the fact that I have built a very solid position in a tech-oriented ETF. But I also, of course, have two to three stocks, individual stocks that I am heavily invested in. Alphabet being, one of the biggest in those three. So, again, the question is going to depend on who and how comfortable they are with certain investment strategies. But I think that when it comes to a retirement account, you're better off playing it a tad safer. And safety doesn't necessarily mean no individual stocks. It certainly means like no penny stocks and none of that jazz. But if you go in the individual stock direction with your retirement accounts, you ought to be really careful to just make sure you're picking winners. An ETF, because this is your retirement money now you're talking about. And I don't care if that ETF is tech oriented or the S&P 500 or, just a broad market fund. Don't mess up your retirement accounts by taking big risks, because you can't touch that money anyways. And you want it growing.
Yeah. Yeah, I would totally agree with that, man. I think generally the closer that you get to retirement, the less that you want to put your wealth at risk. Across your life, like continuing to grow and build the portfolio is important, but you know, you have less room for error the closer that you get to retirement. Fortunately, 10 to 15 years is still a decent amount of time to where even if things go wrong, you'll recover. And across that period of time, you're certainly more likely to be up than you are down. But I would agree with Ari. Like, I think, especially when it comes to your retirement accounts, the thing that's going to, get you out of your job, keep you out of your job and allow you to just stay retired. Yeah, I don't think you want to risk it. And I think that's where ETFs can help. Not to say that diversification guarantees safety, but it definitely helps. It definitely helps from things being too volatile, too swingy in your portfolio, which in retirement could be problematic. Not in retirement, it's advantageous, volatility is, but in retirement, that sequence risk does potentially pose some problems. So, I would naturally lean more toward majority ETFs. But on the other side of that, I obviously have a portfolio of individual companies that I feel like are not very risky. So it also just depends on the companies that you do own. I think the question, in a lot of ways, it's more so a matter of, I guess, how hands-on and how involved you want to be in your portfolio. And also, like, how confident are you in your ability to pick stocks that are not going to blow up your portfolio in a bad way? And can you build something that's diversified enough to not do that? I think that that's certainly a variable as well. And the answer to that question is going to vary from investor to investor. But if you are someone who, is interested in this stuff and wants to, try your hand at picking some stocks, then I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I think that's where kind of a balanced approach, like was described in the question, having mostly ETFs with a few individual companies, that's probably a sweet spot. Especially if you're someone who's maybe just kind of getting into investing. I would not go all in on individual companies out of the gate. I would think start just with ETFs. If you can find, one or two or three companies that you have high conviction in, I don't think there's anything wrong with putting a sliver of your portfolio in those, especially if the majority of it's just in the diversified ETFs.
Hey, Ryan, here's a question I ask a lot of guests who pop on Masters of the Market with me. Been asking this question more recently, so I'm curious to get your take on this. Like to your point, we're saying, if you're newer to investing, don't throw money into individual stocks, build a foundation, with a broad market fund or some type of fund, an ETF. At what point, monetarily speaking, like an amount, would you say it would be an acceptable amount then to deviate from the fund and start picking individual stocks, like 10,000, 50,000, 100?
That's a good question. I don't know. Let me think about that for a sec. So at what points, at what portfolio value would it make sense to start adding individual companies? That's what you're asking?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know that it is based on a portfolio value. I think that it makes sense to start adding individual companies if you find yourself, number one, for some reason you have the interest to do it, which can probably pop up at any sort of portfolio value, whether that's 5,000, 10,000, 50,000, or 100,000. I think if you have that itch and you need to scratch it, then maybe start thinking about it, or wherever that point is. So that's number one. But also number two, I think you also need to have some sort of like well-defined criteria of what you're looking for in an individual company. If you're going to start going down that road, you should at least have some idea of what you're doing. Don't do it like me when I first started, just out of the gate, all individual companies, had no idea what I was looking for. It ended up working out, because I figured it out along the way, and you will survive doing that too, but it's not ideal. So if you start developing that itch that you need to scratch, start figuring out what makes for a good investment. What should you be looking for in a company to invest in? And based on your findings there, build out a list. Start building out a list of companies that fit that description, and then try and narrow it down from there. And wherever that leads you, then that's what you should pull the trigger on. But I don't know that there's necessarily like a set portfolio value. I have seen some people throw a number out, like saying you shouldn't even think about individual companies unless you have $100,000 invested. And then, but then at what point, okay, let's say hypothetically that's the number. Let's say $100,000. I've seen $10,000 as well, but let's use $100,000. At that point, it takes a handful of years to get there. You're probably pretty comfortable with what you're doing. Maybe that's why they say that number, and that makes sense. You're familiar with this stuff. You've got a good feel for the market's ups and downs. Maybe it's going to be easier to stomach certain volatility. So yeah, I could see that. But then at what point do you decide, let's say you decide to start adding individual companies there? Okay, so then what? You just, how much of your portfolio do you allocate to that? Is it 10%? And you just find one company? So then the next thing you do is throw 10 grand just into one individual stock? I don't know. I don't know that really makes sense either. Okay, well then maybe you start with $1,000, 1% of your portfolio. But then that's not meaningful enough either. So you have to find some sort of middle ground there. And so for that reason, I don't know that it makes sense to do it based on a portfolio value. I just more so think it comes back to, does the person have the itch that they just have to scratch? And, can you learn the skill set, or are you willing to learn the skill set to effectively and successfully scratch that itch and not get burned? I think that's how you should look at it. And hopefully that made sense.
Yeah, 100%. I like the direction you took it. It's not necessarily the number. It's, the comfortability, the level of comfortability that you have, which ultimately I think, that builds over time while someone
Yeah,
could be investing into the foundational type of fund.
totally.
I personally would say like foundations are huge for me. Like I just think a lot of people try to shortcut their way through life. And so let's just be honest, nobody likes foundational stages. But you have to learn how to fall in love with foundational stages in order to be successful.
Yeah.
So if you are approaching the market and you don't know how to pick individual stocks, you absolutely should not pick individual stocks, and you should build a foundation. Even if you know how to pick individual stocks, you absolutely should build a foundation. But there's a different kind of perspective that I have on that. The perspective is, if you know how to pick stocks and you know what to look for, fundamentally speaking, are the stocks that you pick beating the S&P or a benchmark? And so then I would build the foundation either way, and I would then compare everything to that benchmark. So if it's the S&P, or if you one up the S&P with a tech oriented, fund, and now try to beat that, and so if you can't beat these benchmark funds, then I don't think you really have a business investing in individual stocks. Like you should always have your individual stocks, I think, outbeating at least the S&P. Otherwise, what are you doing? And yeah, okay, you might not beat it, on a weekly basis or, monthly, but I'm talking annual. So if you just find yourself consistently coming up short to the benchmark,
Yeah.
then you got some real problems on your hands. And I think you should resort back to that foundation. And not only that, but I feel like having a really big foundation, a sturdy foundation. I mean, think about it. At least in, when it comes to like real estate, if you have a strong foundation, you can build a high rise. But if that foundation is weak, you're limited to how much you can build. And so in my mind, if you have this massive foundation within your portfolio, you're then telling yourself, well, I can't lose it all because look at the size of this thing. So I can afford, after it's built past a certain financial metric, I can afford to throw 5K at this investment. And you don't think about the 5K because your foundation is 100K or your foundation is 50K.
Yeah.
Kind of how I
So
look
that's a
at it.
good point. That's a good point. And to that point, that's why I think, okay, I guess I do see the benefit of basing it on a portfolio size once you reach 50K, once you reach 100K, because even if you threw five grand into an individual stock, if you have $100,000 portfolio, it's a small sliver of the pie. Um, and I guess even at the end of the day, if the stock went to zero, which if you've done your research right, like the chances of that happening are pretty slim. But even so, worst case scenario, at the end of the day, if it went to zero, then worst case scenario, you're out $5,000. You'll surely recover from that, and will notice it less. It'll have less of an impact if your portfolio is already larger. On the other side of that too, and this is where it gets so tricky because there's so many different ways to skin the cat, and there's so many different ways to look at the same situation.
Classic.
Because on the other side of that, you could say it's actually probably better to start buying individual companies when your portfolio is smaller, because then you have less to lose if you are only put in $1,000 or whatever. You're basically the cost of tuition is less. You'll learn the same lesson without having to invest as much to do it. Does that make sense?
100%. Absolutely. I like to say, man, we're rounding up
Well,
here on the hour, and I know you got to get to the run club.
yeah,
And honestly,
yes,
shortly I'm going to get to sleep because I got a 4 a.m. wake up. So, investors, I got to say, we've had some great questions come in. Drop more of your questions down there in the comments to let us know what you want answered here on the deep end.
yeah.
And
I will say
also,
last thing before we jump off, I will say I think we should get back to doing these Q&As more often. It's fun to do these. It's been fun. We've been doing a great job having guests on, and that's been awesome. But every so often, it's fun to just shoot the breeze, mano a mano, do these Q&A things, and kind of have these. I guess they're all kind of random variety hours, but this feels like a classic deep end episode, and so it's fun to do these every once in a while.
for sure, 100%. It's the OG deep end status, I
Yeah.
also want to say, Ryan, it looks like I am confirmed to be coming to Vegas in March. So also investors, if you want to meet us up and meet, I'm not even speaking English, man. If you want to meet us in Vegas, perhaps Ryan and I can plan something. It'll be rather small, but it'd be nonetheless great to meet some faces. Those of us who join us here on the deep end. So also let us know in the comments or reach out to us directly if you want to be a part of that. But until the next episode of the deep end, Rod and I will catch you in the next one.